You ever just stand on a street corner in a big American city and just listen for a second? I mean, really listen. You hear all these different accents, you see this incredible mix of cultures. There's just this energy, right? It feels like a country that's always on the move, always changing. But how did it get this way? How do you go from a vast land of tribes to a global superpower? Well, that's the story we're going to dig into today. The story of the great American reinvention.
Now, this story, it's not simple. And man, it is not always pretty. It's a story that's really defined by these powerful and often clashing words. Every single one of them is a huge chapter in this dramatic journey that has shaped the world we all live in today.
All right, so to wrap our heads around all this, we're going to travel through 6 key chapters of this incredible story. We'll start with a land of tribes, then the collision of worlds, an idea of freedom, a nation divided, the rise of a giant, and finally, constant reinvention.
So let's start at the very beginning. I mean, way before any European maps were ever drawn. This continent was already home to, well, a lot of people.
And we're not talking about just a few scattered groups here. We're talking about millions of people, organized into hundreds of completely distinct tribes and nations. They'd been living here for thousands of years.
And these were incredibly complex societies. I mean, they were farmers and builders, hunters and traders. They were engineers who built actual cities and vast road networks that crisscrossed the continent. And most importantly, they had these deep, deep spiritual connections to the land itself. So here's the main takeaway, the point we really have to get. This idea of an empty, untouched wilderness just waiting for someone to show up, it's a total myth. This land was already a bustling, vibrant, and ancient world.
And then, that world was shattered. European ships showed up, and from that moment on, absolutely nothing would ever be the same again.
And let's be clear about the language here. This wasn't a discovery. It was a collision, a truly catastrophic clash. European diseases alone wiped out entire populations, sometimes before they ever even saw a European. Land was taken, cultures were attacked, and a whole new order was violently forced upon the people who were already here.
Now, as all these European powers, the Spanish, the French, the British, fought for control, there was this dark engine that was powering all their expansion. You see, the growth of the colonies, their farms, their towns, it was all built on this foundation, this brutal injustice, chattel slavery.
Think about that number for a second. Millions. Millions of people, stolen from their homes, forced across an ocean in horrific conditions, and then condemned to a lifetime of forced labor, all to build wealth for someone else. This tragedy is woven right into the fabric of the nation's beginnings.
But, and this is where the story gets really complicated, out of this brutal colonial world, a brand new, radical idea starts to form. By the 1700s, the British colonies were doing well, but tensions were getting really high. Colonists felt like they were being crushed by taxes from a government thousands of miles away, a government where they had zero voice.
Okay, so this right here, this is the massive contradiction at the very heart of the American Revolution. On one side, you have these incredible, world-changing ideals, right? Power comes from the people, freedom, equality. But then you look at the reality. How did they square those ideals with the fact that many people had no voice, that slavery was a massive part of the economy, and that native peoples were being pushed off their land? For a lot of them, freedom was tied to the right to own property. And tragically, in that worldview, enslaved people were considered property. It's this impossible conflict, a nation born from the idea of liberty while practicing its exact opposite that would haunt America for the next 100 years.
So, after the revolution, the young nation starts expanding westward, and I mean at a ferocious pace. Railroads start slicing through the continent, and it seems like new cities are popping up overnight. But all that expansion just poured gasoline on that fire we were just talking about. Because as the nation got bigger, it became painfully clear that there were two totally incompatible ideas of freedom at war with each other. In the North, which was industrializing, freedom was more and more about being paid for your labor, about individual opportunity. But in the agricultural South, freedom meant the right to own property, and that included owning other human beings. That was the bedrock of their whole economy. This wasn't just a simple disagreement. It was two different worlds trying to exist as one country.
And that impossible contradiction, it finally exploded. The result was the Civil War. It wasn't just a fight over land, it was a fight over which of those two Americas was going to survive. It was the country's most brutal, bloody, and defining test. And yeah, the war did end slavery, But the deep wounds from that conflict and the question of what real equality actually looks like, well, that would echo for generations.
After the Civil War, America started to reinvent itself all over again. This time, it transformed into an absolute industrial powerhouse.
And just look at the speed of this transformation. It's incredible. In the late 1800s, factories are just roaring to life. A few decades later, skyscrapers are literally scraping the sky in new cities. Then, 2 world wars just accelerated everything, forcing America onto the global stage. By the time 1945 rolled around, it came out of that global conflict as the world's #1 economic and military superpower.
But here's the thing. Becoming a superpower didn't magically fix America's internal problems. In fact, it kind of put them under a microscope. So you have America on the world stage talking about freedom versus Soviet communism. But back at home, you have Jim Crow, a system of brutal racial segregation that was the law of the land for millions of Americans. That hypocrisy is what fueled the civil rights movement, which was really just a continuation of that long fight for America's soul. And at the same time, you've got the Cold War, which created this whole other reinvention, a nation reshaped by nuclear fear and this huge ideological battle that touched every single part of American life.
All of these struggles for rights at home, for power abroad, they all feed into our final chapter, the modern era. An era that's really defined by this ongoing, messy, but fascinating process of constant reinvention.
I love this metaphor. It just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? America isn't just a physical place. It's a collection of ideas. And those ideas are constantly being argued over, challenged, and rebuilt by every new generation. So if you're looking for the secret sauce, this is it. This ability to change is the key to its survival. It's a country that just absorbs everything. New people, new cultures, even its own massive failures and contradictions. And it uses all that energy to reshape itself into something new.
So how do you sum it all up? I mean, there's no single neat way. It's messy, it's definitely loud, it's absolutely full of contradictions. But more than anything else, it is relentlessly ambitious. And that constant, chaotic churn, well, that's what makes America, America.
And that leaves us with one final fascinating question. When you look at this long, chaotic, and transformative history, you just have to wonder, what's next? The story is definitely not over. And if there's one thing we can be sure of, it's that the reinvention will continue.